here in the state capitol in Tallahassee. I'm pleased to be joined by Larry Keefe, our new Conservation Commissioner, Deputy Commissioner Vaden Pollard from FDLE, Director Mark Thieme, Florida State Guard, and Colonel Lee Adams from the Florida Department of Agriculture Law Enforcement Services. We have been focusing like a laser beam on immigration enforcement. The states and locals have a key role to play in assisting for 4 years and doing that in ways that have been effective, but also recognizing that we didn't have a partner in Washington who actually wanted to see good policies come to fruition. Now, we did not waste any time following the inauguration of President Trump. In January, the state of Florida signed a memorandum of understanding between the Florida Highway Patrol and Immigration and Customs Enforcement to help facilitate continued partnership to fight illegal immigration and trafficking on our state's highways. We were one of the first states in the nation to enter into what's called a 287G agreement with the Department of Homeland Security through our Florida Highway Patrol, and you've already seen fruits of that. This state and its people from illegal immigration. And of course, here last Thursday, we signed legislation that makes Florida the strongest state in the nation for state and local cooperation with federal immigration enforcement. This legislation will require state and locals to assist the administration in Washington with reestablishing the rule of law, with removing illegal aliens from our communities, and from protecting public safety. And that is a duty that's imposed that also has potential sanctions and accountability measures to make sure that they are meeting their obligations under the law. So we have set the standard for other states to follow. I think you're going to see more states do that in the ensuing weeks and months. And we didn't waste any time. As law, and as part of that, overseeing that is the cabinet, sitting as the State Board of Immigration Enforcement. We signed the legislation on Thursday. We met Monday on a federal holiday to have an emergency meeting of the Florida cabinet. We were able to appoint Larry Keefe to be the executive director, and we have authorized Larry to engage in emergency rulemaking so that we're able to implement the criteria that will be used for the distribution of these grants. And that's something that's really, really significant. And so right out of the gate, that's happening, and you're going to see that work very, very well. Which brings me to today's announcement. So we signed the legislation Thursday. We met at the state level to charge full speed ahead to deliver on what the voters sent us here to do. So as the new administration took office, I instructed state law enforcement agencies to work with the Federal Department of Homeland Security to execute agreements similar to the agreements that we have seen with Florida Highway Patrol. And I'm happy to say that they have successfully done that. We also can report that under the direction of Commissioner Simpson at the Florida Department of Agriculture, that the Florida Department of Agriculture Law Enforcement has also reached a memorandum of understanding to assist with operations from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So these are similar agreements to what Florida Highway Patrol entered into with ICE last week. This is the way that you're doing. Our state law enforcement officers will now be able to fully cooperate with U.S. Homeland Security authorities via this 287G program. Now, this is something that's been in law, I think, since the 1990s. It lay dormant under the Biden administration. This was not something that they supported, and it was something that we worked to subvert. And so if you wanted to do full 287G, they didn't provide the training or any of the resources that would be necessary to be able to do this. So now that 287G is being revived, we have the ability to receive delegation for our state and local law enforcement officers to perform specified immigration officer functions under the agency's direction and oversight. It also allows ICE enforcement and removal operations to partner with state and local enforcement agencies to identify and remove already incarcerated criminal aliens who are eligible for removal before they are re-released into the community. And we had problems with that under the Biden administration, where people would just be simply released rather than have ICE pick them up. This agreement will give FDLE, FWC, Florida State Guard, and the Florida Department of Agriculture expanded power and authority to interrogate any suspected alien or person believed to be an alien as to their right to be in the United States. And of course, with the legislation we signed on Thursday, it is unlawful to enter the state of Florida as an illegal alien. And that is a law that we are going to enforce, and we believe ultimately, I know it'll get challenged, but we believe that the Supreme Court is going to reevaluate some of its prior precedents and uphold that statute. If they're found to be in violation of proper immigration status, that they are held accountable. So this has very important authorities. It allows us to be able to work seamlessly across our state agencies with federal immigration authorities. You are going to see more effective interior enforcement when you have the state and local and the federal government on the same page. They don't have enough resources after 4 years of atrophy under the Biden administration. And so in the intervening period in particular, if state and locals aren't part of the solution, then the problem is going to persist. So Florida's leading the way. We now have FHP with 287G agreements, and we also now have our State Guard, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and FWC. FWC reported, I think this morning, that, and they caught it on video. You have these illegal aliens, they're on top of a building, and they're dumping debris into this canal in Broward County. And I'm thinking to myself, what kind of behavior is that? You come in, you don't even have a right to be here, and then you're dumping all this stuff into our waterways. And so they were detained. They're now in custody of DHS, and they're going to be returned to their country of origin. It's like, I think it's just emboldened because you had 4 years where you could basically do whatever you wanted and the federal government wasn't going to hold you accountable. But those days are over. We're here in Florida. We want to be part of the solution. We're leading. And I really appreciate everybody that's been involved in doing this. We had the legislation signed Thursday. I talked to the 3 cabinet members at that time. Would-be member, I don't think James had even been sworn in yet as Attorney General. Talked to Commissioner Simpson, CFO Petronas, and I'm like, we got to move quick. And they were like, absolutely, let's do it. And so we did that on the holiday on Monday over in Niceville in the Panhandle, which was really, really good. We're going to finalize everything that needs to be done on the State Immigration Board at our next cabinet meeting. So we'll be soliciting input from the Law Enforcement Council. They're going to provide recommendations that we'll synthesize and utilize, to the extent it's appropriate and the extent that we agree with that. And then we're going to be off to the races. So this is something that I don't think there's any state that's even in the ballpark of doing what Florida's done so far. So I appreciate the members of the Florida Cabinet from leaning in, and I thank the head of the agencies, Agriculture, Law Enforcement, FDLE, State Guard. This agreement executed now with FHP, we're leaning in. We're working really hard. We're not sitting on our hands. There's things when you're in positions there's things you have to do, and you got to do it, and if you don't do it, you could be judged harshly. But there's other things that you don't really need to do. I mean, we could just say this is the federal government's problem and let them do it, and if they don't do it, but that's not what we're doing. We realize this is a problem for everybody in terms of how this impacts. You know, we could have just turned a blind eye when we see illegals dumping stuff into the canal. That's not the appropriate thing to do. Without having the legislation, though, you could have potentially done that. But that's not how we roll here. We want to be part of this. Be our last chance to solve this problem once and for all. So all the state agencies are on board. We're ready to roll. We are rolling. We have been rolling with operations over these last few weeks, and we're going to continue to amp up those efforts. So thanks for everybody that's been involved. Thanks for Larry Keefe for stepping up to the plate and being willing to help with this. We're going to hear from some of those folks, and then I'm going to sign the executed agreements that we have reached with federal immigration officials. So we'll start with Larry Keefe, then we'll hear from Roger Young, then we'll hear from Mark Thieme from the Florida State Guard. Larry, come on.
Sure. What I want to start out with is to give you a little context, to give you a little description of my perception of what we're doing in terms of the analytical framework that we're bringing to this project, because everything 287G agreements, you need to understand where that fits in for the public to understand what we're doing here. So our organization, the board, State Immigration Enforcement, the first thing we need to do is we need to be able to identify who the illegal aliens are, particularly the worst of the worst, the criminal aliens. We need to identify them. We need to find them geographically within the state of Florida. And then this is where we need the 287G. We need the ability to go out there, not with or accompanied by always ICE or federal immigration officials, but actually on our own, in the course of our regular law enforcement duties, arrest and detain. So we need to identify them here in Florida. We need to find them geographically, and then we need to arrest them and detain them, and then be involved in the deportation process. Those are the buckets, figuratively speaking, that we're operating in. Now, what's important, a lot of people don't know, is the federal government is primary on immigration. They do have the resources, they have the money, and most importantly, they have the legal authorities to operate in the immigration space. The state and local folks don't, as the governor pointed out. We are not primary. But what I know that. I was a U.S. attorney in the Department of Justice in the Trump administration, the first Trump administration, and that was a key component with the feds. You have authorities, you have resources, but you don't have the people. More than 85% of all law enforcement in this country is state and local law enforcement. And that is going to be key to this mission. As the governor pointed out, and as it's all a state and local game. And my commitment to the cabinet and the governor is that Florida is going to be number one. We're going to be the best. And in all of my interactions in the great 3 days that I've been on this job with the federal government contacts is Florida wants to be first. We want to know exactly what you need, where you need it, how much you need. Our legislature has given us resources. I've been given the authority from the governor and the cabinet to execute and move. Tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, I'm leaving here and going to Washington. I'm not sure when I'm coming back, but that's my commitment. It's so important to understand it, is it gives the state and local folks in Florida, police chiefs, them and all their organizations, the ability to go out there, put their hands on people, arrest them, detain them, and deport them, so we get illegal aliens out of the state of Florida and out of this country on airplanes. So with that, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Roger Young.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you, Director. It's a leadership team, and just to be a part of this historic partnership that we're all working together to combat illegal immigration. And I'll say this, Florida does it right in so many realms when it comes to law enforcement, working together, whether it's natural disasters or responding to combat illegal immigration or keeping our people safe on a daily basis through general law enforcement. We check our egos at the door, we work together, and it's all about getting the job done and keeping people safe. Governor, under your leadership, we have increased surveillance. Continually, we stop Currently, when we stop a migrant vessel at sea, we have to wait for federal authorities to arrive at the location on the water, which could take some time. Sometimes migrant vessels are overloaded, in danger of sinking. They also possess an officer safety risk, as we have experienced. A lot of these migrant vessels are occupied by 10, 20, sometimes up to 50 migrants, and with usually only 2, 3, maybe officers on board. This creates a safety risk at the point of interception. With the implementation of this new legislation and the 287G program, we will no longer have to wait for federal assets to arrive to help us with this situation and to transport individuals for those that illegally enter through our waterways in the state and our country. This is going to be an outstanding asset to have moving forward. These incidents will be safer, they will be more efficient, and they will be widespread with advanced training and additional authority under this new legislation, the 287G program. So with that, we stand committed to supporting Governor DeSantis' efforts to protect our borders and look forward to working with Director Keefe and all of our state partner agencies and locals on the mission of combating illegal immigration in Florida. Thank you.
All right, Director.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and Governor, thank you for once again serving as a vanguard on such an imperative state and national matter. Through your courage and tenacity, Florida leads the way as a rule of law. Thank the Department of Homeland Security and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement for entering into this strategic partnership with the Florida State Guard, investing in us these specific authorities, enabling a whole-of-government approach to combating illegal immigration. We will utilize all available forces, resources, and authorities granted to the Florida State Guard under Florida law and the provisions of this agreement. The Florida State Guard is organized, trained, and equipped as an air, land, and sea capable joint force that augments local, state, and federal law enforcement task force operations, from offshore maritime surveillance, maritime interdiction, to inland counter-trafficking and countering illegal immigration. Your Florida State Guard provides year-round maritime and airborne capabilities in conjunction with other state agencies. Our operational experience in countering illegal immigration began last year, partnering with our state agencies here and others, with Operations Vigilant Sentry and Operation Lone Star. Most recently, we've begun augmenting the Florida Highway Patrol in their BITE operations. A few examples of the capability areas which we are contributing to this fight: special missions units, which have been working alongside FDLE, FWC, Highway Patrol, and National Guard over the past year. Some examples include approximately 6 credentialed law enforcement officers within our special missions sworn unit, 11 fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft and crews with sophisticated all-weather overland and over-water surveillance, mapping, cell phone locating, state law enforcement, and satellite communication systems. Our 15 boat teams, including 4 very capable law enforcement variants that are offshore, high speed, and long range. Our 20 UAS teams include 4 advanced systems that are beyond visual line of sight capable. Governor, teammates, ladies and gentlemen, your Florida State Guard is mission capable, and we are all in. We stand ready to protect and defend against all threats to public safety. And illegal immigration presents a multitude of which must be eliminated. Thank you for the opportunity to share in this lawful duty, and I look forward to contributing to a rapidly successful outcome. Governor?
Okay,
Sure.
great job. Okay, so I'm going to formally sign these. Or no, FDL. That were in the game. Okay. Who wants one? Larry?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Who else? Thank you. All right. And then agriculture is also, they have an agreement. Have you guys signed it yet? Or?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so their agreement's signed. So Florida Department of Agriculture, 287G, state agencies that are under governor command are also locked and loaded and done. And, we're looking forward. So this is what it means to be in the game. This is what it means to lead and to be part of the solution, and not just sit on the sidelines and use this for campaigning, but to actually say, we're in office, let's do something about it for once. So thanks to everybody involved, and this is another good day, and we're going to continue to work really hard on this issue. Thank you. So we're excited about this. I'm going to be going up to Washington on Friday. We'll have opportunities for the governors to meet with cabinet secretaries about different issues affecting our states. Obviously, the immigration stuff we've been out ahead of. There may be some things we need to discuss, but I think by and large we're working very well, working in sync with the folks up there. One of the things that we're going to be looking for is support for the Department of Commerce to delegate us the ability to manage our red snapper in the Atlantic, just like we do in the Gulf. How is it that you have 105 days of Gulf red snapper and bad data, bad big success in the Gulf? And I know people in the Atlantic, our anglers, will be really, really happy if we were able to get that done. So that'll be on the agenda. The other thing will be on the agenda, and I've mentioned this earlier, we have invested record amounts in conservation and environmental stewardship, but particularly with respect to restoring. If you look at what we've done on the reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee, we did the STE. We were ahead of schedule. We obviously have reservoirs on both sides of Lake Okeechobee. We've raised the Thieme Trail. We're doing all this stuff. We're happy to do it. It's made a big difference already. It will continue to make a big difference. But you have the main reservoir is under the Army Corps of Engineers. It's behind schedule. So our request is going to be, and let us build the damn thing. We'll get it done a lot quicker. We will do it a lot better. And I think the president is of this mindset. I think this is exactly consistent, with his view of cutting down bureaucracy and letting the states step up to the plate. So if we can get, just for the EAA reservoir, if we're able to get that, we'll put our folks to work, we'll get it done. Now, part of the component of that is with the EPA, getting the restoration of our what they call 404B permitting authority. What that does is it just allows our state officials to follow federal law, but issue the permits if people are in compliance with federal law. If it stays with the Army Corps, it takes forever, and that has implications for commerce and the economy. But on all these environmental projects, much longer waits. And we'll get it done. The other thing is on the issue of education. We have worked really hard on reforming higher education. I know voters across the country, not just in Florida, have been horrified at some of the things that have come out of some of these universities, particularly over the last year and a half. And we want to focus on the classical mission of a university. But part of the reason we've gotten in the mess that we're in is because of these accreditation bodies. And these are basically self-selected entities. Nobody elects these people, but the Department of Education approves the accreditors. We want to see a reevaluation of how the accreditation is done. We have legislation that's been enacted in Florida for alternative accreditation properly. Then I think a lot of the problems that you see potentially could fall by the wayside, and I think that that's really, really significant. The other thing is you know, we do have some concerns of some of the other things that the Department of Education has done under the Biden administration, particularly with how they've treated states that have embraced school choice, and we think that needs to be corrected. And so we're going to pursue HHS and would love to be able to speak with the Secretary about, you know, how many years ago did we do the Canadian importation program? It was President Trump was in office the first time. He approved us doing this. It was stonewalled under Biden. We've been in the courts. We've got issues with Canada on it. And the reality is you have the same drugs that are much cheaper there, and we could save the state a lot of money just if we did it through our programs. Now, I think individuals should be able to purchase too, but if they just allowed us to fill our needs, we've got a warehouse. I mean, I did events. We've done events at this warehouse. I think it's in Polk County. Like, it's ready. It will relabel. We're ready to go. We've been ready for so long on this, and we basically had 4 years of being stonewalled on it. Now we have a new regime, and so we'd like to see, and that's a continuation of what the president wanted to do in his first term in office. So I don't think that that's going to be such a heavy lift. So there's a number of different things as well that we're going to look to do. But we have an opportunity, and I've said publicly on the whole FEMA thing. You know, the president was getting flack saying that he wants to eliminate the FEMA bureaucracy. But the reality is if you did block grant the states the money, you could block grant less money than what they ultimately spend on each disaster, bypass the bureaucracy, let us handle it, and the money will go farther. That's just the truth. You hear all these stories. I mean, we've worked very hard at prep, response, and all this, stabilization. But these FEMA programs, it's just a Byzantine maze of regulations. And these are people that are hurting, and they're constantly having to battle bureaucrats. And that's not ultimately been something that's been successful. So we would welcome that opportunity to manage those funds ourselves. As I said, figure out how much typical disaster costs, depending on the severity of the event. Some, give it to us, and I guarantee you we'll be able to make better use of that funding. So all the things you're seeing with like DOGE and really taking a hard look at the scope of the bureaucracy. I know they're trying to reduce positions across the bureaucracy. They're finding a lot of these contracts and grant programs. I think it's been very, very positive. I think this is a very healthy exercise. But ultimately, we've got to put this into practice. Whatever they can do unilaterally to empower the states, we're going to ask for. But some of this may require Congress to get on board and to actually be part of the solution. You know, you can identify all this questionable spending, and they've done billions of dollars they found. And some people go, oh, well, that's not that much compared to what's spending. Like, I'm sorry, it's tax dollars. Anything that's improper should be. It doesn't matter how small. I think you would want to do that. But ultimately, Congress is going to have to be the one that's going to codify this stuff. And if they're not willing to do it, then the Leviathan's just going to continue to live on. You may need Congress to act on some of the delegations to the states. I mean, I hope they can do it by executive action from the White House, but the reality is, I mean, I don't know. The reservoir, does that need to be put in the WRDA bill? Does it not? You know, who knows, but it may need to be. And if it does, you know, we hope Congress will want to act to be good partners with the Trump administration.
You want local law enforcement to prioritize detaining unauthorized aliens who are not actively committing a crime?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they have a response. They are committing a crime in Florida if they're here illegally. So we made that clear with the legislation that was passed. Entering Florida illegally as an illegal alien is a criminal offense, and so you will be held accountable for that. You know, how ICE is going to handle some of these, we're going to work all those out. There's going to be training that's going to take place for all of our state agencies. I know the sheriff's departments are going to have to undergo. The police chiefs, you know, we're appointing these police chiefs. We're going to appoint ours today. If it hasn't gone out yet, you'll see that very soon. And so we're going to be working through all these things. Now, one of the things that some of the money can be used for is for some of the detention operations. Now, as I've said in the beginning, we are not going to just displace what the federal government's responsibilities are. We are assisting and amplifying the federal government's responsibilities. And so, you know, we expect them to be shouldering most of the responsibility on the detention of illegal aliens. I think what we want to do is, we have the provision where you can have the bail denied. You have the ability now to conduct operations once they are deputized and have training. But I think a boarding house for this indefinitely. We understand in certain situations, we're going to need to be there. We're not going to release anybody that is a problem if ICE is not available at the time. But I think the default is ICE has this role, DHS has this role. We'll help, we'll supplement, but not displace.
Confirmed tomorrow by the Board of Governors. Why do you think more schools are choosing former lawmakers to lead them in Florida?
I mentioned there's been problems with ideological indoctrination in higher education. We've seen things that I had never thought were possible, like at Columbia University, just really, really detestable ideology and conduct, but particularly the conduct. And so I think people want to know that if you come into one of these positions, that you stand against the indoctrination bent that some of these universities have been, a lot of the universities have done over many decades. And so if you have a record of having done that in public sphere, then that probably gives confidence that you're going to be able to do that when you're the president of a university. If you don't have a record as having done that, then the question is, do you get there and then you get captured by there that have kind of done? I mean, you have some of these people that are protesting the former lieutenant governor, and I'm just thinking to myself, like, wait a minute, you don't get to run the show here. That's not the way it works. And I think there's this idea that somehow, that the faculty, segments of the faculty, factions of the faculty, that they should just be able to dictate how this goes. These are institutions funded by tax dollars, very handsomely funded by tax dollars, mind you. What universities were getting when I became governor versus now. It's been a lot of money that we've provided. We believe in the mission, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that they're operating in ways that are consistent with the state's best principles and best ideals. So when you have somebody that has already proven that they have a dedication to classical mission of the universities, that they have opposed efforts, I just think it gives people a little more confidence that they're going to do that as they go in. The worst thing to do is you appoint someone, there's a mission, and they basically just get captured by folks that don't want to see the mission complete, and then we kind of keep trudging on. And look, FIU's done a lot of good things. I've gone and spoke at the Adam Smith Center. I mean, they've done a lot of positive stuff, but I think everyone wants
in the Senate, with one senator calling him yesterday, Scott Yanner, one senator calling him a misogynist and a bigot.
Who said that? He has been a champion for the types of reforms at universities that we need, trying to drudge up statements and, quite frankly, distorting things. I mean, he's been attacked for being a Zionist and being too pro-Israel. I think all these things are very flimsy, and let's just consider the source. I mean, that same senator called me anti-Semitic, okay? The guy that went and did a cabinet meeting in Jerusalem, the guy that has signed anti-Semitism legislation, the guy that has led the fight against BDS, not only with Airbnb, but Morningstar, and Ben & Jerry's and all these things, the guy that's helped with all the money for security at Jewish day schools, the guy that's done universal school choice. So I think that's just, it's misplaced criticism. I think it's part of a separate political agenda. But if you want to see And I mean, look, if you look under the hood of that university, they're doing things like gender ideology. They're doing the type of stuff that should not be done at any universities in Florida, but particularly in the most conservative part of the state. So I think Scott will be somebody that will be a champion for the classical mission of a university. He will fight the indoctrination and going forward. I'm not somebody that's just going to let someone be out there and be unfairly maligned by distorting all this stuff. People have worked with this guy for years. He's worked with people in Florida for years and have had great experiences and great things to say. So I don't think he's anti-Semitic at all. And I think that we got to get beyond trying to drudge up and trying to smear people based on mischaracterizing or bad faith interpretations of what they've done. And, I'm not leaving anyone on the battlefield undefended. If you're willing to step up and serve and you're somebody that's a reformer, we want to see you do good. But what I've told some senators, just talk to them, bring them in, interview them. Like, you have an important role. If you honestly see something, then that's one thing. But to go off innuendo and some of this stuff, I don't think is good. So 100%, and look forward to him being able to talk to the members of the Florida Senate.
On the session, and we're less than 2 weeks away. You previously laid out a lot of things that you would like to see them do, including ballot initiatives, which you said you think you've got buy-in from them on that. You also made some suggestions on condos. You actually had a plan to use the SBA to sort of help out the associations. It doesn't seem like that's getting any traction yet. I'm just kind of curious, do you anticipate rolling out some more proposals ahead of the session?
So the number one thing that we needed to get done, we've done with the immigration. This is a front burner issue. We've worked on it a lot, but now with Donald Trump being president, I mean, it's like we're either get it done or we're going to go home. So we were going to get it done, and we did get it done. I felt there was urgency, and the legislature obviously responded. We had a little bit of back and forth, but the reality is we got what we needed to do to defend the state and the citizens. Doesn't run amok is something that's very important. I absolutely think you'll see the Speaker and the President of the Senate work towards enacting really strong reforms in that respect. I do think that that's something that's very important. We got to get that done. And look, on the condos, we've not been like prescriptive. Like, we've solicited input. We've provided input to the legislature about here's what some people are saying. But the original law was not anything I was involved with. I mean, there are things I get behind, and we work with them, and we try to negotiate good products. This was not one of those where we were involved. I was criticized for not being involved. People said that I was trying to tank it because I wasn't involved. But the reality is I didn't know what the right answer was. This was in the shadow of Surfside. There was a lot of emotions. It was a good faith effort. I mean, if we can do legislation that would prevent that, obviously we would want to do it. But I think the concern has been even though the legislation was well intended, it's having some serious ripple effects. And it's imposing costs in situations that is not like the integrity of the building is at stake. And there are things that maybe should have been done before. But the question is, do we want to just have transparency, accountability for HOAs, and then let people make decisions? Or do we want to be overly prescriptive? And the bill that's in law is prescriptive. So I just want people to be able to make ends meet. If somebody is going to potentially have to be forced out, if there's something we can do to prevent that, I want to do that. But I don't have any hard and fast demands on this. I just want to listen to people. We have done that. We've listened to people around the state. I know the Senate has brought people in to listen. And so we want to make sure that folks have a shot here and that there's not unintended consequences allowed to take hold. That's all it is. And we just want to do that. But how we do, you have ideas. Some ideas are good. Some may not make it to the finish line. There are things that are legitimately have some concerns about when you think through how it would be implemented. There's others, there may just be a policy difference, right, in terms of how you're doing it. But I do think that we should just listen to folks. We should not want to see anybody be forced out of their condo because of regulation. Well, obviously, we don't want to ever see Surfside, but I think that there's probably a gap between, what you would need to do for the transparency and things for a Surfside situation and then some of the costs that are being imposed. So I just have a concern about that because I think people want to stay in their condos. I know there have been issues with, it's really caused the market to change. And some people say, well, this should have been done a long time ago, that some of the HOAs have dragged. And I think that's true. But I also think like someone bought into one of these, they've been there for 20, 30 years, maybe they're on fixed income. Can they afford a crippling assessment right now? And I think for some people, the answer is probably no. And oh, by the way, I mean, we are living through the last 4+ years has been the most inflationary period in decades in this country. And it's affected almost everything people have to buy. I mean, we 4.5 years. We now have this issue with the eggs, with how they're handling the chickens. And these eggs are going through the roof. That's not easy for people. You've had so many other things that have gone up that, that having assessments on fixed income is really, really difficult. So I want to be positive. I want to work in ways that you can approach this, but I do want to be there for folks if they're in a tough spot.
Governor, DOGE is pushing for cuts on NASA's workforce. How do you think that that's going to impact operations in the Space Coast?
Actually, I think it potentially very much benefit us because what they should do is they should stop the project that is scheduled to start to spend $500 million on a new NASA building, scrap that, pocket the $500 million, $500 million, and it probably will end up costing $1 billion knowing how these things work. Move the headquarters to Cape Canaveral. There's already renovations going on. They're already expanding. You can fit people right in there. I know the people at Kennedy, they want to have this, right? They want to have it there. You can have everybody there, and that could be the headquarters of NASA. I think you could do it because some of the D.C. people may not want to move there, and they give them that option. If they don't, then fine. But I think you could absolutely reduce the number of bureaucrats, particularly in D.C. A lot of them are working from home now anyways. Relocate the headquarters to Brevard County, and you could probably do it for not only probably, you absolutely would save a lot of money. I think you'd probably save about $1 billion, quite frankly. So we should do it. I think it'd be good for Florida. And I don't know if we're going to be able to, I know we're meeting with cabinet secretaries on Friday. I don't know if we're going to meet with any representatives from DOGE, but if they ask me, what do you think? That would be the first thing I would say. Don't build that new NASA building in D.C. You don't have people showing up anyways. Move the headquarters to Florida. We already have stuff going on at Kennedy Space Center. Things are already being expanded. And I'd be good for Florida, and I think it would save the American taxpayer a lot of money.
On the Canadian drug importation plan, doesn't that require the approval of the Canadian government? And wouldn't that be a little difficult right now, considering the tariffs? I mean, they're booing the national anthem.
But I don't think that has necessarily changed the calculus. They were opposed to the legislation. Canada was opposed in 2019. They sent emissaries down here because why? Because they're protecting subsidies for themselves. That's why. If we're able to buy at cheaper prices, that is going to be potentially impact the supply that they have. It potentially could cause some of the Canadians to have to pay more. I mean, we subsidize Canada with drugs. We pay higher prices because the patents apply here in the United States. Canada pays dirt cheap. Europe pays not as cheap as Canada by and large, but still much cheaper. So I think what the president has said is, you have these drugs, let's have basically everybody pay similar. So that would mean we would pay less, Canada would probably pay more, Europe may pay a little bit more, but that's more equitable. So they've been opposed to this from the beginning because it's kind of a golden goose for them, right? That they get to have these discounted pharmaceuticals and they're basically being subsidized by American consumers who are having to pay. Some of the drugs in Canada are like 20 cents on the dollar. The same – portion of that, and that's irrespective of what they're doing now in terms of booing the United States. Although I will note, I see this article, I put something out, says, oh, Canadians rethinking, going to Florida in light of the tensions. I'm seeing a lot of Canadian license plates in Florida. I think any of you who are out there and the places, you're seeing them. They always say people are going to stop going to Florida. I mean, what was it? NAACP announced a boycott. Other groups announced a boycott. And I think every time they announce a boycott, we end up setting a new tourism record. So I don't anticipate you to see a decline in Canadian tourism to Florida. I think that they want to get out of the cold and come down, and this is something that I've been used to pretty much my whole life. I mean, when you grow up in Dunedin, they have the Toronto Blue Jays spring training. So as you get into February, I would say like can be Ontario license plates at some point. I mean, they're up when it gets a little warmer in Canada, and they have a right to do it. But the reality is don't tell me you're not going to come to Florida. I mean, I am totally fine if you honestly mean it and you say it, but it's just how many times have we lived that? Remember when they were going to move Disney to Columbus, Ohio? They were going to do all that. Disney's going to leave. I mean, they just announced, $18 billion in investment in Central Florida. So I think you're going to continue to see Canadians coming down here. And I would also just point out, this Trudeau government is on the way out one way or another, it seems, that he's going to be gone regardless of the outcome of the election. Part of the reason we had such an influx of Canadians in 2020, 21, and 22 was because of the draconian COVID policies that Canada was doing. Remember, the Toronto Blue Jays had to play in Dunedin, Florida, because Canada wouldn't let them play. Restrictions. We had people coming down because they wanted to escape being forced to take the mNRA jab, people that were escaping lockdowns and other types of really, really tough policies in Canada. So I think that the Trudeau government, I think they treated the people very poorly for a number of years, and I think that's part of the reason why we've seen an uptick in the number of people from Canada that have come, and some of them moved here permanently. So that's why I don't think you're going to see much of a change in that. Okay, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.